Everyone knows someone who has dealt with the issue of domestic violence. Today we will be speaking with Doris Rivera-Black, a survivor of domestic violence who wrote a book called Clothed in Strength, where she talks about her situation married to a very abusive partner. She has traveled the country spreading awareness on this matter and has even appeared on Oprah. Now, this video is going to be a little bit longer than you might be used to, but I urge you to watch through to the end, as a lot of important information regarding domestic violence will be shared. Let's talk to Doris today on The Good Life. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of The Good Life with Professor G. I'm Professor G, and today I have a very special guest that I want to introduce to you, who wrote a book, Clothed in Strength, which talks about how she was a victim of domestic violence and how she survived that ordeal. So I want to introduce to you Doris Rivera-Black, and she will be sharing her story with us today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
It's awesome. Thank you. So let's start from the beginning. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Well, I grew up in a very loving family. My parents didn't have a whole lot, but they were very full of just love for us as children. But growing up, we didn't have a whole lot. So both of my parents had to get a lot of factory jobs, odd-end jobs, and oftentimes they needed to have us with a babysitter. And since we had such a large family in Massachusetts at the time, they would leave us with different family members. Just, they trusted them in order to make ends meet and all of that. So very loving family, Puerto Rican family, full of culture, full of love, full of huge family gatherings, things like that. But as I was growing up at about 6 and 7 years old, sadly, we had a close family member that was actually living with us. And unfortunately, he began to sexually molest me. And at 6 and 7 years old, you don't really understand what's going on. You don't understand why this is happening. I feel like at that time, I knew it wasn't right, but there was this fear instilled in me that if I were to say something to my parents, that I would get in trouble, and I believed it.
Right, very common. Sure.
Sadly, that went on for a while, and one day, and I don't even remember why, he was no longer living with us. It was about a year, maybe a year and a half after that he was no longer living with us. And that was something that just I dug deep inside and never told anyone until later in life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, those are things that are very scary for a child and very embarrassing. And a lot of times they, just stay in silence, and people grow up with that as like a root of, fear and bitterness, and self-esteem also is affected. Yeah. So after you, had those experiences that you didn't share, that you kept in secret, how do you feel that affected you later on as an adult?
I didn't realize it until later in life, but looking back, I see where that affected so many areas of my life. I had low self-esteem. I was extremely insecure. Yeah. But then there was this other side of me that was very feisty and very just wanted to just defend everyone and myself. And so there was like this level of brokenness, but also this level of, I wanted justice to be served. I wanted people to be heard. I wanted people to be saved from these things. Sure. I just never spoke on it, but it did create a lot of insecurities in me. I did not like the way I looked. I did not like what I saw in the mirror. I did not believe people when they said compliments. It really was something that I pretended wasn't there, that I hid. But ultimately, those kinds of things kind of spill over into other areas of your life, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so unfortunately, even though I had all the love with, by my parents and all of that, I had this thing that was just holding me back from my fullest potential. And it was this secret that I was holding that I felt, gosh, I don't want to share it with anyone, because this is not only is it embarrassing, I was really scared of ruining our family dynamic and creating drama. And what if I'm not believed? These kinds of things.
Sure,
and so
which happens a lot, unfortunately. A lot of victims
sadly
are not believed. And I've worked with them, and it's very sad. And sometimes they muster up the courage to finally say something, only to be shot down and not be believed.
Right.
For whatever reason, maybe shame on the family, or the individual plays the part of the good uncle or the good father or the good, fill in the blank.
Right.
And you don't want to be the one that rocks the boat.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a very common thing, unfortunately. So this, obviously, you grow up and then you want to have your own family, you want to have your own relationships. How did it affect you in that regard?
Well, I think that, when you go through something like that, it is very confusing as a young person to understand what true love is. What does this mean? What does true love mean? I remember seeing my mom and my dad, and they had a lot of love for each other, but it was a typical Latino family where the man of the house made all the decisions. It was cultural. It wasn't abusive, but it was culturally just something that we just grew up with. My dad, made all the decisions. He, about everything. And my mom was the one that served, and she worked too, but she would also be the one that served and did all the things that the woman is supposed to do. So I remember seeing that growing up and thinking, that's not going to be my situation when I get older. So that was the feisty part of me, right? I'll never have that happen in my future marriage. And you start making those kinds of declarations as a child. Right. But I didn't really know what it meant to be in, what does a healthy relationship look like, right? What my parents didn't have an unhealthy relationship. I just know culturally, it wasn't what I wanted. Sure. In a marriage in the future. And so I, was extremely insecure, like I said, and I wasn't allowed to have a boyfriend. My dad was very strict. And so I wasn't allowed to do a whole lot. So I remember when I started dating my first boyfriend, which is the father of both of my oldest daughters, I remember just being really scared that my parents were going to be mad at me. And I finally shared it with them. I was like about, I want to say 16 at the time. And hesitantly, they allowed me to have him as a boyfriend. But I had this distorted view again of what love meant. And so we became intimate very quickly. And because I thought that's the way, I guess, a man is going to love me. Right. Yeah. And so we were both so young, and we got pregnant like immediately. And that was an incredibly difficult time for us. I actually was older at this point. I was 18 when I had my first daughter, but as a result of me getting pregnant, I had to break the news to my parents. And because my dad was so strict, and he trusted me with this boyfriend, he was so disappointed that he told me, okay, well, if you're old enough to get pregnant, you're old enough to get out of the house. And so that was really difficult for me. I think I cried for my whole pregnancy, because I was forced to leave my home, and I was forced to move in with the father of my daughters, with this family that I didn't know. Sure. And so I sadly, we got married. He went into the military. We ended up in Colorado, and our marriage didn't last a lot because we were both very young and inexperienced with life. And once we started hitting trouble with each other, we just butted heads, and we decided not to stay in this marriage, which was a really difficult thing. But at that point, I felt a lot of shame, because when I grew up, I was always told, you never divorce. You divorcing is a sin, right? And when you marry someone, you stick with them through sickness and in health,
through everything,
through death do us part,
yeah.
which, I believe in that. I truly do. But I believe that when you allow, and this is just my belief system, when you allow God to pick that person for you, then yes. But when you make silly choices and, you're just operating out of inexperience or out of your own, whatever that is, right? Then, that's a difficult thing to deal with, because here I am, I'm a young mother of 2 children, and I'm divorced already, where that just doesn't happen in my family, right?
Sure,
we don't divorce.
Yeah.
So that was a shame, another layer of shame added to my life.
And a public one.
Yes.
Not a private one.
Right.
Because everybody will know about the divorce, about the children. And then you were already hiding that other stuff within. So was there any violence in that first marriage, or was it just like 2 young people not getting along?
2 young people not getting along. He is a great father to my girls. We get along great. He's been in my girls' lives the whole time. His wife, also great stepmother. So it wasn't a violence thing. I mean, he did have at the beginning a little bit of that cultural man of the house, machista type of thing. He's grown out of that since then. Goodness. But we butted heads so much, because if you remember, as a little girl, I was like, I'll never. So we would butt heads a lot, right? And over this, and he eventually, grew out of that. But he's a great dad. He's always been a great dad. He's he's been in their lives the whole time. But it was, that inexperience. We were both two young kids that didn't know what we were doing. And once trouble hit, we just gave up.
Right. It was kind of a marriage by default. Right. Because it's like, well, we got pregnant. My dad says I have to get married. So let's go to the courthouse and let's do this. It's
pretty much how it happened. Yeah. Right.
Okay. Well, tell me about James.
So here I am, this young mom of 2 little girls. I didn't have a whole lot. I had to go live with a friend when I split up with my husband, with the girl's dad. And I had to go live with a friend. I was working night shift at this place here in town. And this gentleman that worked there was incredibly just friendly with me, very charming, very nice. He would often give nice compliments to me. He would often wait around for me, like in the break room, and just really charming. And at the time, I was like, gosh, like, I'm not even divorced yet. Like, this is not okay. This is not something that I want to get into. I was really trying to stay clear of this person, but he was extremely persistent. He just didn't give up, right? He would bring dinner to me. Oh, hey, I cooked some enchiladas. I brought you some, that kind of thing. Once he found out I had daughters, he would bring me gifts for me and for my daughters. He would wait around till I got to work and, open the door for me. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. I've never been treated this way. Sure. And he would just give me the nicest compliments, and I wasn't used to that. You hear from your parents, but
those don't count.
Right. But he just was just the most charming man, right? And I thought, wow, like this guy cooks. This guy, brings me gifts. He tells me all the things that just make me feel so good. And so this went on for a while until I was like, gosh, like, what if he's a good guy? What if I'm not giving him an opportunity?
You may miss out.
Right. Yeah. And so I eventually just kind of gave in, and we started dating, and, I ended up getting a divorce and all of that. And he just continued with, all of these showering of gifts and bringing me home cooked meals. And he was a great cook. And I thought, wow. And so we ended up getting married just short of a year after we dated. And he did all the right things. Yeah. He helped me cook. He helped me clean. He just did all of the right things.
Sure. And how old were you at this time?
Oh, gosh. I was 20. I want to say I was 24, 25.
So still a young woman.
Very young.
Mom, yeah, with 2 girls.
Yeah. So, he was just a charming man, and I quickly fell in love with him.
Yeah.
Or so I thought. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, it's hard to say no to that or to see the issues, because as I read your book, I noticed that you said these same things about your current husband. And so, I don't want anybody out there to think like,
Right.
well, if somebody's, treating me well and doing all these things,
Right.
they must be an abuser.
Right.
No, there's a point where there's like,
Yes.
where was that point?
That's a great question. So, once we started, when things started really changing was when we got married. I feel like there was a time where he wanted just to get his hook in. And once he got his hook in, he wasn't blatantly showing his true colors, but it just progressed, right? The little tiny hints of control and manipulation just started at that point. And there were things that he would do that would make me go, that's interesting. But I could never connect the dots at the time. Looking back, oh gosh, like it painted a clear picture to me. But at the time, I was a little confused because I was like, gosh, like this guy was this perfect man. And now I'm starting to see hints of just jealousy and insecurity and control. And they weren't very blatant things. Like I said, it was very subtle. It started very subtly. A lot of stories that he would tell me wouldn't make sense. He shared why he had a divorce with his ex-wife, and he had shared, why he was fired from a certain job, and just things that just didn't make sense to me. And it would just make me think, what's going on here? It's odd. It was
right,
odd.
like certain inconsistencies.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Now, I did read in the book where you discuss him crying a lot after arguments and, just wanting things to be better immediately, like not being okay with going over a process of, negotiation, or, maybe we need to get help of some kind. There was a lot of crying, and that sounds like it drew you in more. And that seems like it fed the self-esteem part that you discussed earlier.
Oh, yes. That was a tactic he used, is being emotional. And anytime we would have any discussion where there was a tension, he would cry. And at first I thought, wow, like he's emotionally intelligent. Like he's actually not afraid to shed his tears. He's not afraid to cry with me. And but it was really just a manipulation tactic. He wasn't honest, but at the time I thought, wow, it's so, oh my gosh, like he really cares, that kind of thing.
Right.
But he just started thinking, just doing things that just didn't make sense. We worked together in this place. He was fired while we were together. There were rumors about why he was fired, and he told me, oh gosh, I was fired because there was a phone call that I made, and no, the old job, I was fired because of some silly reason. And there were rumors, but I was like, I'm not going to believe that. So he convinced me to get a job at the same place he got his other job at. And he convinced me to follow him there. And I recognize now that it was just kind of his way of keeping tabs on me, Right. He wanted me around him all the time. And I did. I went over there, and then he got fired from that job. Right. And he told me that it was because he was rude to customers on the phone, when I found out later it was for sexual harassment.
Okay.
And so I didn't know that until much later. But again, rumors, and I would defend him. No, there's no way. So, and he would cry to me, I don't know why people are seeing this. People want to ruin me. They're just jealous of what we have. They're jealous of our relationship, and they don't want to see us succeed. And I bought into that. I believed him at the time, even though there was part of me that was like, something's off here.
Sure.
Something's not right here. I chose to rationalize those feelings, that intuition that was kind of warning me. Right, I chose to rationalize it instead of paying attention to what it was trying to warn me of.
Sure. And it also made you feel like, we're this unit, and it's us against the world, right. And, it's us and them, and I got to stick stick by my man, like the
Right.
song says, you
Right,
know?
exactly.
So at some point later on, though, you decided that you wanted to become a cop.
hmm
Tell us about that.
Well, if you remember, I shared where when I was a little girl, I had this feistiness, and I
Mhm.
wanted. I had this thing about justice, like I wanted people to get justice, and I had wanted to become a police officer since I was a little girl. It was either a police officer or an archaeologist.
Okay. All right.
And so I had wanted to do this. And I had seen an advertisement for the sheriff's office, El Paso County Sheriff's Office here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And I thought, I want to try out for that. I want to try. And so I shared with him, hey, I want to try to apply for this position. I have all the right requirements. And he was like, well, why do you want to do that? And I said, it's just something I've been wanting to do as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, well, I don't know, because you're small and, you're a small female. I'm not sure if they're going to pick you, that kind of thing. And so he kind of just gave me his, okay, dear, okay, you go for it. Not thinking, I feel like he wasn't thinking I would make it through.
Right.
Well, I made it through the very first interview, the first round of selection. I made it through and I got into the academy.
And it sounds like these things were boosting your self-esteem.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
You know, which would go against whatever plans he might have had
Right.
to continue the manipulation and stuff going on, because your self-esteem would defend you against that.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And so I got into the sheriff's office, went through the academy, and he, at first I thought it was great, but he would come by the classroom often, and he would bring us donuts. He would bring us food. He would bring me flowers. And I thought at the time, wow, this is great. Like, oh my gosh, he's so amazing. Look at the support I'm getting.
Right.
And
right.
even some of my fellow colleagues that were going through the training with me thought, wow, that's awesome. With the exception of a couple that were like, why is he around here all the time? What is going on here? But I didn't see it that way at the time, right?
Right.
Once I graduated the academy and started working as a law enforcement officer, that's when I really started to see him just shift, a little bit more jealousy, a little bit more manipulation, a little bit more insecurity. And he just escalated again, little by little. If I were to come home late from work, there was an interrogation. Why are you late from work? Who were you with? I don't believe you. Do you have proof? These kinds of things.
Right.
Oh, I bet you that you were hanging out with this deputy that you work with, or I bet you were hanging out with that deputy that you work with. And that just, it was just a constant issue. Anytime I never responded to his phone calls at work right away.
So it was a lack of trust.
Huge
basically.
Lack of trust, huge. And he would call my work all the time, because at the time I worked in the jail. Before I went out on the road, I was in the jail.
Right.
And so he had access to phone numbers there. And he would often call, and if I didn't call him right away, now mind you, I'm in a jail working with inmates.
Right.
We're literally sometimes fighting, trying to control individuals physically.
Sure.
And because I didn't call him right away, he would assume something else was going on. And I'd have to tell him, I was literally in a fight. trying to subdue,
with an inmate, with a killer.
Right. So, and that just continued and got worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. One thing that I've discovered about trust is that you never win. No matter how much evidence you show, if the person doesn't trust you because they have a trust issue themselves, you can never prove it to them.
Right.
You can send them photographs. You can send them, people to vouch for you. It doesn't matter.
Right.
If they're going to believe something about your behavior and not trust you, there's nothing you could do to ever prove it to them. So is that where you started to talk about in the evenings when you're trying to go to sleep? He's like pulling the covers off of you, turning the TV up, just doing all these awful things to force you to address him when you're trying to go to sleep because you have to go to work.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Oh, it was such a difficult time. I remember just feeling exhausted all the time and just not knowing what was going to happen from day to day.
Right.
And he wanted me, almost like he wanted me to admit that I was with another man, or that I wasn't interested in him anymore, or that I didn't love him, or that I didn't want to have intimacy with him anymore. It's almost like he wanted me to say those things, and he was not okay until I said those things, and I wouldn't, because I'm like, that's not the case.
Like he wanted you to feed his pain or something.
Right. It was
a very twisted. I mean, you said you had a different view of love, and it sounds like he did as well.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so he would literally follow me around the house, and I would beg him, please, can you just please let me sleep? We can talk about this when I'm off, when we have time. Right. Please just let me sleep. Please just he would turn on the TV and vacuum in the room just to try to disrupt my rest.
Sure.
If that didn't work, then he would just say, well, I'm going to leave, and he would take all the drawers out of the bureau and just dump it on the bed on top of me. And when that stopped working, when he was seeing that wasn't having the same effect on me as it used to, right, then he started threatening suicide.
A huge manipulation that a lot of people sadly resort to, because it puts the other person in a situation where it's like, well, are you willing to watch me die? And it makes you start to, and I'm sure that kind of affected you and your, upbringing and feeling, like you didn't want to rock the boat. Mm-hmm. Much less do you want to see this guy kill himself. Right. So did you believe his threats?
I did at first. I absolutely did.
I bet that was tough.
It terrified me. It terrified me to think that he, in my mind at that time, I thought I was causing what was causing him this pain, so much so that he was willing to take his life. I felt responsible for that. I felt like it was my fault that he was feeling this way. And because of this, I wanted to help fix that in him. I wanted to help fix him, right? And we all know we can't fix someone that doesn't feel they need fixing. Mm-hmm. But in that time, I thought, my gosh, I need to save him. I need to help him. And so it was extremely terrifying, especially because oftentimes he would put knives to his throat and in front of me. And I would literally just frightened that he would do something. Yeah, and when that wasn't the case, he would storm out of the house in the middle of the night sometimes, and he would call me, supposedly from a train track. And he would tell me, I'm sitting here in the middle of the train track, and if you're saying you don't want to work things out with me, then I'm just going to let the train run me over. And I would beg him, please don't do that. Please don't do that. Come home, please. And he knew this. He knew this was working. He knew that this tactic was reeling me back in. Sure. Yeah, anytime there was a threat of us separating or divorce, that was his tactic, and it worked every single time until later in that marriage. Yeah, that's an awful thing to hear, and to believe that you're, the one that's responsible for this happening. And all of this while you were working as a Colorado Springs police officer. Yes. That's unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah. So at some point, because this progressed, as it usually does. Yes. And I just wanted to mention something quickly about the crying, because I've done a lot of work with domestic violence perpetrators. And a lot of them come in the group when I was running the group, and they would say things like, I feel really, really bad about what I did. I feel really sorry about what I did. But I noticed two types of individuals. One would say, I'm really sorry about what I did. Teach me to not continue being this way. Yes. And the other type felt like just feeling bad about it was enough. Right. And I would explain, it's not enough to feel bad about it. Feeling bad about something is like having a feeling about building a shed behind your house. Right. You could have a really big feeling about building a shed behind your house.
But if you don't have the tools to
Right.
build the shed, you're not going to have a shed.
Exactly.
You need to go to Home Depot and get the tools, the wood, the hammers, all that stuff. And I would say this program is the Home Depot
Yes.
for these issues that you guys are dealing with. So I need you guys to really think about that, because feeling bad about something is not enough.
Right.
Because some victims will say, he felt so bad about it. It's like, who cares?
Right.
Big deal. What is it leading to?
Mhm.
So this progressed.
Yes.
And at some point, he threatened to burn the house down
Yes.
with your family in it, and your
Mhm.
parents were living with you, and your daughters and everything. I mean, that was awful when I was reading it. I'll admit, I was a bit moved by some of these things that I read. And then there was a restraining order keeping him away from you. At some point, you had to do it.
Right.
You know, you had to just
Mhm.
like, all right, this is, and you tried at one point, you didn't get it
Right.
because it wasn't enough.
Right.
But then when he finally did something more egregious, you
Mhm.
were able to get the restraining order.
Yes.
Okay. So once that happened, there was a day that you talk about in the book.
Mhm. Mhm.
What was that day?
July 26, 2006. And this was something I never thought he would ever, even being a law enforcement officer, I never thought him ever being capable of something like this. Because what people don't understand is, you hear about domestic violence relationships, and people assume it's just physical abuse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Punching, hitting, whatever. But he never once struck me. He never once hit me. Ever.
Which is surprising, to be honest.
Ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that he recognized that would have like opened my eyes a little quicker, and he knew that the way to control me was through the mind games
Mm-hmm.
and the emotional abuse and making me feel this small. And so he used that to the fullest. And this night, I had already had the restraining order in place because of some things that he threatened. And thankfully, it was approved that time. And just to back up a little bit, that first restraining order that I tried to go for, that magistrate sat there and told me that it sounded like it was just a bad marriage that needed some help. And so here I was thinking, okay, maybe I'm the problem.
Sure.
It did not validate what I thought was happening, because I had some great friends that told me, listen, this is abuse. He's trying to control the money. He's using money against finances. There was some sexual abuse that I did not recognize at the time,
right,
that it was that case. And so when that judge said, it sounds like, it doesn't sound like anything.
You were that little girl again.
Yes, it shrunk.
Yeah.
I shrunk back.
Mm-hmm.
But after he made some more threats that included my oldest daughter, that's when I was like, oh no, this is not going to happen. And that one was approved. But I still, even then, did not think that he would do what he did. I remember I had a sprained ankle because I had a training exercise where I sprained my ankle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was in civilian clothing. And so I know that in the Oprah show, she said that I was armed, but I wasn't. She made a mistake there. I was not armed that night. Okay. I was in my civilian clothing because I was injured. So when you're injured, you get to do office type work at the sheriff's office. And so that's what I was doing. I did not have my gun, but I was called into the lieutenant and sergeant's office that evening. Very supportive office, very supportive staff there. I always was supported by everyone there. They pulled me into the office and they said, Doris, we just want you to just be careful because we've seen these things go really south. And literally that evening, July 26th or June 26th. And I shut them down and I said, look, I understand, guys. I know him. He's not going to do anything. My family's at home. He's not going to dare to do it. I'm watching. I have my safety plan in place. I'm changing my routes every day. I'm calling my mom before I leave work. I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to be doing. I'm fine. I'll be okay.
I'm sure you went to many domestic violence calls
I did.
when you were working.
Well, not at that time because I was working in the jail at the time. Right.
Oh,
so
correct.
at the sheriff's office at the time, it's changed since then, from what I understand. At the time, they don't teach you about the dynamics of domestic violence. They teach you how to respond to a domestic violence call, separate the parties, make sure everybody's safe, and do the interviews. They don't teach you necessarily, at the time they didn't, the dynamics of domestic violence. So I had nothing.
Right,
no
you
clue.
might have been more aware.
I had zero clue. I had zero clue that was an abusive marriage until some people started validating for me. And then I went to an advocate and they validated for me. But I did not think he would take it that far. And so I told him, hey, we'll be fine. So I did what exactly I said. I called my mom. I said, hey, Mom, on my way home. Home was not even 20 minutes away. It was about 10:30 at night, and I'm driving home. I'm paying attention. Nobody's following me. I'm good. I get to my street. I pull up to my house, and I'm like, okay, this is my safe place. This is my home. I'm safe, right? Because I knew he had been following me and stalking me. He had been doing this, and some people had caught him following me around and seeing him in different locations.
It's very common to be done prior to an act of like severe violence is the stalking. I think it's like 70% of all cases.
Yes,
the person stalks the victim first. Right.
And and most of it I didn't know about except for a few instances. And so I knew that. So I was watching, but when I got home, there was this obstacle in the driveway, and I thought, that's odd. It was like this big trash bin, and it said Ace, the red letters Ace from Ace Hardware. And I'm like, that's not ours. Who put it there? And I thought maybe my family put it there thinking it was ours. It belonged to the vacant home that was right next to our home. And so I parked on the other side where the vacant home was because I couldn't park in the drive in that part. And I thought, okay, well, all right, I'll just park right here. I'll move it. So as I'm trying to exit the vehicle, I turn around and I see this silhouette coming from underneath the stairs that lead up to my front door. There's an opening. There was an opening behind the stairs. And he had a hat on. He had a black shirt, black pants. And I just froze for a second. And I was like, oh my gosh, is this him? And he comes right up to me. He grabs my arm and he said, you need to come with me. And I said, no, I'm not. And I'm thinking in my head, what in the world? Like, you could do this in front of my house? Like, how stupid are you?
Right.
But as I flung my arm back, he pulled out his weapon and pointed it at me. And he says, no, you're coming with me. And my life just flashed before my eyes. And I had to make a split-second decision. I had to decide, what do I do? Do I scream? Do I yell? Do I try to fight him back? Or do I go along and try my best to survive the situation because my family's in that house?
Right.
And God forbid he does take me out.
Right.
He'll go after my family, and I just could not live with that.
All bets are off when he pulls the weapon. You don't know what he's capable of at this point.
Exactly. And I'm a small person.
With a sprained ankle.
Right, with a sprained ankle. I'm trained, but not so trained that I was confident enough to be able to fight him off and leave that situation safely and make sure that my family was safe. So I chose to follow along, even though I begged him to please think about what he was doing. I asked him, please just think about what you're doing. Don't do this. Please don't do this. Right. And he took me up the road where he had his car parked and stuffed me in the truck. And I was just praying that somebody would see something. I was too scared to scream. I thought, if I scream, he's gonna shoot me. He's gonna kill me. And so, long story short, he took me to some town in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of some train tracks, and he assaulted me. He sexually assaulted me. And, I get this question a lot, like, you were a cop, Doris. Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you use your training? Why didn't you defend yourself? Did you not know how? And I said, yeah, I was trained. I said, but like, something happened in my mental state. I literally shrunk back to that little girl. And all I could do was cry. All I could do was curl up in a little ball and cry and pray that I would leave that situation. I was ready to die that night because I thought, gosh, like this is one of those cases where the husband kills the wife and then kills himself. Like I literally was prepared for that night. And I was even thinking through as he was assaulting me, I was thinking my brain, not only was I was like just like this little girl, but I was thinking, gosh, also part of me was like, I need to leave evidence. They need to catch him. If he kills me, he needs to be caught. If he doesn't kill himself, he needs to be caught. So I was thinking of ways to leave evidence. And after he did what he did, something in me just changed. You know, I started becoming really angry and like, how dare you do this to me? And how dare you? But I had to really control those emotions because I didn't want to set him off, right? But I had accepted I was going to die, and then something in me said, no, you will not die. You will not allow this man to take your life. It's not, it's not fair. He can't do that. You have two little girls to go home to.
Sure. And it was really impressive to read that in that fight or flight survival mode, how you were able to think of ways of manipulating the situation and knowing his weaknesses too, and promising him that everything was going to be better, that you were going to put this behind you, everything was going to be fine, you were going to go back home, and you had to get back home because people were worried, and he ultimately let his guard down, and you were able to escape.
Yes. And I say this, I only by the grace of God, because it was truly miraculous, because he would not even allow me to leave the car to go to the bathroom that night. He would not even allow me to. He would make me step 1 foot out, because he did not. He was, very, very meticulous in everything he did, except for when that started happening. And he allowed me to go into a restroom in some gas station in the middle of nowhere. And he checked the bathroom to make sure there was no escape route. I go in there and I just started crying. I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, how did I get here? How did I get here? And that's when I really just started. That's when the tears just came down. And I was like, I know, I'm not pushing my views on everybody, but I'm a person of faith now. I had been far from God in this time. And I felt unworthy, to be real. I felt so unworthy. But that was my only chance. And this is the part, when I cry, talking about this, it's not tears of sadness. It's more tears of joy. Because I was so lost. And here I am, a nobody. So I thought, I cried out to God that night and I said, if you're real, I need you to show me this now. I know that I was not put on this earth to be taken like this from my girls. My girls need me. If you're real, I need you to come down and help me. I need you to help me.
Yeah.
And I wasn't praying, please help me, please help me. No, I said, I need you to help me. And I just felt this supernatural peace come over me in that moment. And I thought, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be okay. And even though I was still terrified, but again, like you said, I was able to turn it around on him, that manipulation, stay calm through it, as crazy as that was. And he started crying again. Oh, I'm so sorry I did this to you. I just can't live without you. This was the only way. This is the only way I can get you to listen to me. I can't live without you. And he kept saying that and kept saying, I'm like, I know. And through that, there was an opportunity for me to steal the car, basically, and get the heck out of there. Yeah. And I was able to get home safely. The police were waiting because they were all searching for me. It had been hours since I was missing. And my mom had called the police. My daughter had called the police. She was 11 at the time. And
And there was a restraining order in place, which is a huge red flag.
Yes. They all thought I was dead. They thought he took me. He's going to, statistically, in those situations, it's not a good outcome. It's just not.
Yeah. I mean, I share this sometimes, the statistics. I mean, the numbers don't lie, even though sometimes they're not telling the whole story.
Right.
But I think it's like over 70% of women who are murdered in this country are at the hands of a husband, ex-husband, boyfriend, or ex-boyfriend. You know, where with men, and there are women that kill their husbands also. And it's not just talk about the males, but you know, most women who are murdered are because of an intimate relationship. You know, which is awful. But it's good that people like you are doing this work and spreading the word and trying to get people to learn about the warning signs and what is available and what you can do if you are in a situation like this. So I was going to ask, how did your faith help you through this, even though you did talk a little bit about that already? But I think the proper question would be, how does your faith help you get through this? Because there's always a lot of anger, something like this happens, resentment and hatred and things like that. And I've had a lot of victims tell me, not the first day, because if I tell them this the first day, they'll never return.
Right.
But eventually, when we build a trusting relationship and a strong therapeutic relationship, I start to talk about forgiveness. And almost like to the person, they will say, how do you expect me to forgive this person? Because they think that means going back.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean going back. So how has your faith helped you to overcome those feelings of maybe hatred or anger?
That's such a great question. It's a pretty loaded one, but I'll try to keep it simple. That was not easy for me at all. So that night when I prayed, I told God, if you save me, I will give you the glory for the rest of my life. And I have. But I did not realize the aftermath of all that was going to happen, because when you get out of an abusive situation, it's not the end of the story.
Right. Some people think it is the end, but it's not. Oh
gosh, it's somehow. I say this, and I have to say this carefully because some people may misunderstand me. So I have said this before, that sometimes I almost would have rather gone through that night again than to go through what I had to go through afterwards. There was the court case. There was those feelings. There was just so much that it was overwhelming. The court case in itself was hard. I'm grateful I did it. I'm glad that I was given the strength to get through it. It was necessary to put somebody very awful behind bars, because there was a lot more to him than I realized. There was other women that were abused by him in the past that came forward. There was so much more that we don't have time to talk about, but there was a lot of evil in this man, and he needed to be put away. And so I knew that I had to remain doing this court case, but I was angry. I was numb for a while. First, I was numb. I was numb. I just wanted to get on with my life.
Sure.
I started working 2 weeks after, even though the sheriff said, "Hey, take the time you need." I didn't want to think about
busy.
it. Exactly. Yeah. So I occupied that with busyness. And once that busyness would end, the feelings would remain of anger, of just, why did this happen to me? All of these things, and bitterness. And it was spilling over into other areas of my life, even my job.
Sure, yeah.
And I'm thankful for the friends that I had that worked with me, because there were times where, my case was a high profile case. It was all over the news. They didn't name my name, but everybody knew who the deputy was. Everybody, the inmates knew it. Everyone knew it. The inmates knew it.
Not every deputy looked like you did in the force.
Right.
I'm assuming.
The last name, they named him.
Oh, okay.
But I was the only deputy with that last name. Right. And so they shared, Deputy Sheriff was kidnapped at gunpoint and sexually assaulted. It was all over the news.
Which I think back to your being a little girl and wanting to hide all this stuff.
Yes.
And now it's all over the news.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that must have been really hard.
It was difficult. And I remember a situation where I was in the intake section where they bring all the new arrested people. And this guy, they brought him in, and I had to pat him down to make sure he was safe. And he just started, he recognized my name. And then he started making just very obscene things, saying obscene things about me. And, hey, weren't you that deputy that was raped by her husband? Oh, he should have effing killed you. He should have. It was a test of my patience and control. I tell you that I self-admit that I was ready to, because he had long hair. I was ready, and I'm not proud of feeling this way. And I would never do this, but in the moment, I wanted to grab his hair and I wanted to smash his face into the cement wall in front of him. Right. I was so angry, but gosh, I had such great coworkers, and they recognized this. They pulled me away from that situation.
Right, right. You were so vulnerable at the time. I mean, that's...
And there was grace for me. There was grace for me. My sergeants and my lieutenants and even commanders, like all the way to the sheriff, there was grace for me because they knew. But when they saw this happen, they're like, Doris, you need to take time. You need to take time. Yeah. Like this is, and so that was one of those moments where I just was like, oh my gosh, like I would have done that. Right. Had my friends not been there for me, I would have lost my job, and my girls would have, that would have affected my little girls. All that rage
that you were holding in would have just...
Exactly. Yeah. And so I knew I needed help at that point. I knew I needed help. And so I started going to therapy. I went through EMDR, which, your viewers can look that up.
Oh yeah. Very useful for trauma.
Yes. I went through EMDR, and then I was going to church at this time, and I was really trying to figure out this whole healing thing. And I'm like, I know that the Word of God says that He heals the brokenhearted, that He heals our wounds, all of these things, but I didn't know how to get there. I was like, how, Right. And so I would talk to a lot of, my mentors at the church, my pastor, and it was helping. But the forgiveness piece, I was like one of your clients that said, no, I refuse to. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing this.
Right.
Until I was in my next relationship in life with my husband now. Mm-hmm. That's when I recognized that was becoming an issue for me as well.
You were dragging it into the next relationship. I mean, it's easy to sit back and judge, but when you've worked with people that have gone through these traumatic events, you understand why it is so difficult to forgive. Oh, just forgive and forget. It's just like everything else, easier said than done, of course.
Absolutely.
Of course. Yeah. So you've become an advocate for domestic violence awareness. You've traveled the country, and I believe we have a clip from Oprah, as you mentioned earlier, that you had been on Oprah, which, how is Oprah? She as cool as she seems on TV?
I only interacted a very short time with her, but she was pleasant with me.
Did you get a car?
No, I wish. I wish it was one of those shows. She did not.
Well, let's take a peek at her on Oprah real quick here.
Right, by a stranger than my own husband.
Well, thank you for coming forward. And so you're in the business of protecting us from people like that who do harm to women and other people.
Okay, great. So you have continued to speak out and you have many irons in the fire in the community. You worked with TESSA, which, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that, which is a local here in Colorado Springs. And then you have your own thing called Never a Victim. Tell us a little bit about those.
Sure. So TESSA is a local nonprofit organization here in the county of El Paso in Colorado, and they service victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. And it's an awareness center. They do a lot of education around these things at high schools and schools and things like that. They also are the only shelter in this area for victims of domestic violence. And so I served with them for years. I was on the board of one of their organizations. It was like a little support group that they had, and I was on the board of that group. And I was just it was just my way of giving back, right? At that point, I think that I had done some kind of healing enough to be able to help other people who've gone through what I went through.
Right. Wonderful.
And so that great organization here in town, and then Never a Victim came out of my I just wanted to empower women. And I knew there was more. So after this incident happened, I poured myself into learning how to not only physically defend myself, but mentally, and knowing the signs and being aware and listening to my intuition and all of these things. And so I just poured myself into all of that. So I got more training for self-defense. I became a self-defense instructor at the sheriff's office. Actually, they call it arrest control instructor. So I did that there, and I dove into martial arts and things like that. And just not recently, it's been 7.5 years, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And
You're a purple or blue?
I am a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Amazing.
Yes.
That just goes to show that not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah.
Some of them wear a gi.
With a pretty purple belt. So that's my favorite color too. So, so Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and all that. But I started the Never a Victim program before the school that we opened. But Never a Victim was really just a way for me to share with other women that they're worth defending, that they have a right to be in a healthy relationship, and that they have a right to defend themselves, right? So we took that course. In the first hour, we talk about situational awareness, mindset, survival mindset, what the dynamics of domestic violence is, what a healthy relationship looks like.
Important stuff. Yeah.
All of that. And then we go into the self-defense portion, where I include martial art called Krav Maga, which that's where I used to train that before Jiu-Jitsu. And then just recently I've added Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu into the mix as well. So it's a 4.5-hour course where you learn some basic self-defense, basically how to immediately defend yourself and get away from that situation, right? And then at the end, we do a simulated scenario where a man dresses up in a padded suit and simulates an assault. Now we go over the different types of assaults, like the common assaults, like domestic violence type assaults, you know, chokes and things like that. And then we go over some of the less common ones, which are stranger ones, right? We're seeing more of that these days, but they're not as common as the ones that are known.
Right.
You know, the victim knows their perpetrator. So it's a lot of fun. It's very empowering. Lots of tears, lots of laughs, lots of women coming out of there thinking, wow, I can't believe I did that. I did it. And just feeling empowered.
Sure. That's awesome. That's so important. And, you know, you're such a treasure in this community.
Thank you.
You know, I'm very, moved by your story and your testimony, and, you know, how you survived this whole awful thing and came out on the other side. So many victims end up in another relationship where they are victimized again, and they just keep doing that. And you seem to have figured out that there was something within you that needed to be fixed, and it seems like you've done a good job of doing that. And now you're spreading that, you know, information with so many people that need to hear it through, you know, TESSA and Never a Victim. And you also run a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu studio. I'd like to put all of that information of all these links and resources in the description below. So if anybody is interested in any of these things that we've discussed, please take a look. And if you know someone who needs these resources, please share it with them, because a lot of these things occur in darkness and they get worse and worse. And one day you're like, wow, I never knew that was happening. And it's because people just don't want to talk about this. These are very personal and shameful things. And nobody wants to admit that they're dealing with this stuff. So I truly appreciate you coming on today. If I could ask you one last thing, what would you say to someone who's suffering in silence?
That's good. I would say, please talk to someone. Say something. You are worth defending. You are worth having a life full of joy and peace. You are worth loving. And you're not alone. You're not alone. There's someone out there is going through what you're going through. There's a lot of people going through what you're going through, who have gone through it, and they have come out on the other side, and there's always hope. I am an example of someone who has overcome, and I am truly healed. I don't have anger, that unforgiveness. I don't have that anymore. I've been able to overcome. I've been able to forgive. I've been able to heal, and really make a life that I'm proud of, and a full life, and I'm grateful for my family, because without them, I feel like they were my biggest support system. My husband now, he was very patient with me, and he was an amazing person that I feel God used to help me get to where I'm at today. And my girls and my son, like, it's just, life is so amazing, and you can have that life too, but it starts with you speaking out, saying something. There's safe ways of doing that. You can contact your local domestic violence organization.
Sure.
Advocates are typically confidential.
We'll
so say
add
something.
these resources
Perfect.
also.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes.
Yeah.
Say something. Say something. You too can have a life.
Yeah.
Full life without abuse.
Right. And the book, Clothed in Strength, by Doris Rivera-Black, is available on Amazon, and I will be providing all of these links in the description below. It's a quick, easy read. Just make sure you keep some Kleenex nearby. Thank you once again.
Thank you for
You're a
having
true
me. I appreciate
treasure
it.
in the community.
Thank you.
All right. How was that?
That was a mouthful.
If today's video brought something good to your life, please like and subscribe, and share it with your family and friends. In addition, if you'd like individual counseling, I'm available in the state of Florida and in the state of Colorado, and my contact information is in the description below. Till next time, go ahead and have yourself a good life.